They're probably from like mid-70s.
Oh, Candace, can you get my
What's
sign?
this?
We're live from Longview with,
What's this?
we're live from Longview with Sheriff Mark Nelson. So what are your three,
No,
four
Candace.
top priorities for the
On the wall. Oh, behind his mom.
Oh, okay.
See the light switch?
Uh-huh.
Do the one closest
There's
to Elvis.
some other things going on here, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay.
So my three top priorities, is that?
Yeah, it says three to four top priorities.
3 or 4 top priorities. Okay.
Well, you can leave that one on.
So
There you go.
there are a lot of things that I think are really important to the citizens of Cowlitz County. And, over the last 9 years that I've been the sheriff, I've worked on a number of these things, and they remain priorities. Probably the first top priority for me is sheriff's office, is staffing for the sheriff's office. Right now, we're at about 0.9, a little more than that, 0.93 deputies per 1,000 residents, and that's for the 45,000 people in the unincorporated areas of Cowlitz County. So that that number of 0.90 is below the state average, which is about 1.14 for the number of citizens in number of deputies per 1,000. So we're below that average, and quite honestly, considering we have about the same number of people that we did 40 years ago, and I know people are tired of hearing me say that, but you know what? It's just a fact. We have the same number of people as we did 40 years ago as far as number of deputies to serve the almost twice the population and almost twice the call load. So that's one of my priorities, is continuing to work on that issue. I took a little bit of heat publicly because and maybe some accusations that I wasn't taking this seriously, the attempt to get more personnel, because last year I did my narrative request to the commissioners in the form of a poem. But I was looking for something that would make it stand out a little bit. You sit down and you go, well, I need X number of people, and I need this and I need that. Just for departments in the county. So last year I put my request in the form of a poem. I wanted it to be remembered. I wanted it to stand out. As it turns out, because I'm taking a little heat for it, people are still talking about it, so it must have worked. It did stand out a little bit. The only part of it that didn't work was that I didn't get any more people. So that again is one of my priorities. The second, and I've been very, very clear about this, is school safety. School safety is an issue that, to me, is something that we need to continue to work on, not only in law enforcement, but as a community. The statistics just are not there that there is a great risk for parents sending their children to school that they're going to be injured or that there's going to be a school shooting, which is everybody's biggest fear, and that's what everybody talks about when you start talking about school safety. That's what they're thinking. But honestly, schools are safer today. There are fewer instances of injury and death at schools now than there were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So they're actually safer now than they were, even though we hear more about the school shootings and such.
But luckily not in our area.
Not in our area. I think that one of the numbers that I saw was a school district could plan on having a shooting at one of their schools like once every 900 years.
Okay, that's hot, so.
So the numbers just aren't really there. However, there's more to school safety than, oh, they're playing my song.
Yeah,
Um,
I know you're here.
There's more to school safety than, oh, it's those firemen.
And they might be going to the assisted living by where you live.
There's more to school safety than than just being concerned about the potential for a school shooting. School safety, in my view, also includes things like drug use and bullying and some of those things that happen on a daily basis in the schools that really, things that really matter to parents and the things that matter to teachers that hamper a student's learning. So having law enforcement, having a law enforcement presence there or something that helps bring a measure of security is, I think, really important. It's very important for us to continue to do that and work with the schools. Now, Longview Police has they have a school resource officer program and work very closely with the schools in their jurisdiction. Kelso does as well. All of the other municipalities
Like that.
all work very closely with the schools in their districts.
That
The
was
thing
pretty close.
for me that I look at and think is an issue for the sheriff's office is that we have 6 schools
Yeah, we have a place.
in our jurisdiction, from Tootle to 3 schools that are in the Kelso district, 1 that's in the Longview district, and 1 that's in the Woodland school district. So, and that's everywhere from, covers all from Tootle clear to Yale. So we have a lot of schools to deal with, and so that's a big issue. The other one, of course, is the drug issue that we continue to deal with. I had a meeting earlier today with Senator Cantwell, Marie Cantwell, who just
Thank you. You guys
had
have a
we
good
had
day.
a roundtable discussion today, talking some about the
Not a good day.
about the new legislation that was just passed. The president just signed into law on opiates and how that's going to impact
Oh my gosh. what happened?
how it's going to impact us
She relaxed.
here in Cowlitz County. And I think it'll, all those things have to get worked out. When you get federal legislation, along with that has to come federal dollars, and along with those dollars have to go it has to be the breakdown of how that's all going to actually come down really to the people on the street that are actually administering those funds and utilizing those funds. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But the piece that's most important, I think, and one of the reasons why the sheriff's role is so important in all of this is that the sheriff, as a community leader, along with other law enforcement, but the sheriff has to take that leadership role in coordinating with all the different
Oh, okay.
pieces
Uh,
of the drug issue. And that includes prevention, it includes treatment, it includes education, and it includes enforcement. All of those impact. We can't arrest our way out of this. We've heard this said before. You can't arrest your way out of our drug problem. You can't just treat your way out of it or prevent your way out of it. People are people, and they tend to, some people just have that addictive personality.
Yeah.
And they want, that's something that they seem drawn to. And then we have this big supply,
Yeah.
coming over
yeah, it really looks like
the southern border primarily. And so we have this huge amount of supply coming in, so
Oh, it is, that's where you see
it's
it on-
inexpensive, it's fairly easy to get. Those things have to be dealt with on the enforcement side, and then emphasis on the treatment side, emphasis on the prevention side, and emphasis on the
It's a vicious
education side. It is, but I think we can make an impact if we're working collaboratively, if we're working together. And that's one of the reasons why I've worked closely with the treatment people and with the prevention people and with public health on this issue, and have been part of this discussion now for some time, because it's important that we work together to move this forward. Because it's not something that any one of those entities can fix. You can't just make the law and expect law enforcement to enforce the law and have the problem go away. If that were true, then we wouldn't have anybody speeding or running stop signs
Or on the phone while they're
on the phone while
driving.
they're driving. Any of those things. If it was just a matter of making the law and say you enforce it, then the problem will go away. Yeah, that's not how it works.
It's true.
So those are my few top priorities. And
Well, those are good priorities.
I've,
I think you got her on to ask you these questions. So let's talk about endorsements. Why do you have the ones you have and don't have others? I think you pretty much covered that already.
well, some of the, I don't,
Or some of that.
and I don't mind touching on that. As far as the campaign goes, I'll start off by saying this. I believe I'm a really good sheriff.
I believe you are too.
Thank you. I think I've been a really good sheriff. I'm not sure that I'm a good politician. And I never really aspired to be a good politician, just so you know. That was never something that I ever said, boy, I sure would like to be a good politician. No, I don't. I have not asked for endorsements. I didn't go and request endorsements from anyone other than the public. That's those people I have asked for their endorsement. And I asked for their endorsement, not only some of them on a piece of paper, but I've asked for their endorsement in the form of their vote. But things like the police guilds and the fire associations and some of those that are out there, honestly, I didn't ask. I did not go and seek those endorsements, not because I wouldn't like to have them. Obviously, it would be nice to have those, but honestly, out of respect for those organizations that I worked with on a fairly regular basis, I never felt that it was appropriate for me to do that. And so the last two elections, I did not ask, and I didn't this time either. So I guess that's part of the reason why I would like to believe that I don't have those endorsements is one, because I didn't ask. The other part that I find kind of interesting is that they didn't ask me either. So I had no opportunity with any of those organizations, with the exception of one, and that was the Sheriff's Office Deputies Guild, who did invite me to come and talk to them, which I did, and they made their choice for their endorsement. But none of the other organizations that we've seen on endorsement lists for my opponent, none of them invited me. None of them came and said, we want to hear what the two candidates have to say. And I think that that's really unfortunate, because I think it shows maybe a leaning one way or another. Maybe it's just the way that the wave is going. I don't know, but in any event, I will say this, that with some of the issues, some of the things that have been brought up, I still haven't heard any of them say because of this or because of that, we cannot support or won't support. It's all been, well, we like this guy better. So as far as the endorsements go, I think that's where I'm at. Honestly, I feel very, very good about the fact that we've had tremendous support from the people that we've met and talked to in the public.
Well, we all like you as a sheriff.
Well,
Just so you know.
I'm happy. I hope that
Well, everyone here would
enough
agree with me.
voters.
Oh, yeah.
So what does law enforcement mean to you?
Well, it's not only been been a part of my life. Growing up, of course, with my dad, Les Nelson, being in law enforcement, and me looking on, at my dad's memorial service. My brother, I think, when he spoke about Dad, said something that I thought was really touched me and meant a lot. And he was talking about when we were growing up, when you grew up back in the 50s and 60s, the heroes on television rode horses, wore cowboy hats, carried guns and went after the bad guys. Those were the heroes. And that was Dad. I mean, Dad was a cowboy and wore a badge and a gun to work every day. And
Now you're following in his footsteps.
yep. So as far as what law enforcement, I mean, as far as it being a foundation for me in who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing, it has meant a lot to me, because I see it as someone who is honorable, truthful, trustworthy, all of those things that are character traits that I value and that I believe should be first and foremost in the county sheriff. That's what I grew up with. That's what I saw, and that's what I have tried to live up to. And I'm human, I mean, I make mistakes like anybody else, but I always go back to the fact that I'm doing something that I believe God's called me to do. That it's more than not just a job; it's a ministry. It's part of who I am, and I am who I am because that's the way God created me, and that's the way my folks raised me, and
They did a good job.
and that's who I am, and that's what I do, and I do it for the citizens of this county.
What is your community involvement?
Well, if you ask my wife, I'm far too involved in things.
That's because you care about it.
Because I'm gone a lot at different events, and it's not just I'm really fortunate because I get to connect with a lot of different things because of singing the national anthem, and
I understand you're very good at that.
I've done it for over 40 years.
That's what Candace tells me.
So this year was my 41st year of singing the national anthem at our rodeo. So I've done that. I've sung it at the Black Bears home openers, at the Babe Ruth World Series, I sang for the Seahawks home opener in the Kingdome. And so I've done lots of that, but I'm engaged in the community in many, many other ways as well. Part of my involvement with the community is feeling that I can have an impact. If I can have some input into a variety of organizations. So the chaplaincy, Pathways 2020, connecting Cowlitz communities, just to name a few. And then the invitation to attend and be part of other functions, either through music or some other piece. And so there's a lot that goes on throughout the days, the weeks, the months, the years that where you're engaged in the community. That kind of engagement also moves into my law enforcement career, where I've been engaged with the Washington State Sheriff's Association. In fact, was elected president of the Washington State Sheriff's Association by the 39 other elected sheriffs. Huge honor. Been elected to the board of directors, the executive board of the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. So I serve on that board. I'm on the board of Northwest HIDA, which is the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area board, that executive board. Those things, plus a number of others, have afforded me the opportunity to not only be involved and engaged in the things that are happening here, but also at a state level and a national level that will impact law enforcement for decades. And I don't know, it's not because I'm anything special. Honestly, I just have made myself available, and it's not because I'm not the sharpest guy. Or
you get out there, you get involved with people, and you help them. And
I
you care. That's the main
care
thing.
about people.
You care about people. You make sure things get done the way they should. Anybody needs a hand, they can count on you.
I think that's my job as a public servant.
Well, you're a good one.
Thank you.
So, what is your Second Amendment view?
Second Amendment.
Like if someone comes in your home, you can shoot them and it's okay. But I was told if you pulled them in the house and left them laying there.
No. Yeah, I've heard that one as well.
Good, you can clear that one up for me.
Yeah. So my view of the Second Amendment is, first of all, it's our Constitution, and it's more than the Second Amendment of the federal Constitution. It's also in the Washington State Constitution. And so both of those documents, which are our founding documents for both our country and our state, are very, very clear on the rights of the citizens to keep and bear arms.
I would never do that.
Yeah, that's good. So when I took my oath of office, and I swore to defend, and to protect the laws of the state of Washington, constitutional laws of the state of Washington, and the Constitution and laws of the United States. To me, I have no choice. I have no option but to do what my oath, what I swore in my oath, and that was to support, defend, protect all of those constitutional rights. It's not just the Second Amendment. That doesn't end at the Second Amendment, but it also includes the First Amendment and the Third Amendment and the Fourth and the Fifth, all the way through. Those every one of those has the same measure of importance and the same measure of protection, or requires the same measure of protection from every elected official. Not just the sheriff, but from every elected official. Quite honestly, I get a little frustrated because I hear other elected officials who tend to, or are tending to do things that I don't view as being protective of our Second Amendment rights, and that's an attack on my rights as
Well, I think
well.
we have a right to bear arms and defend ourselves. I
Absolutely.
always say it's not the weapons, the person.
Well, that's very true. And you know, in the state of Washington right now, we're looking at a citizens initiative, Initiative 1639, which I believe, if passes, is going to seriously infringe on some of those rights, and set up some laws in the state of Washington that, one, are totally unenforceable. Two, it appears as though it's going to set up some kind of a without calling it a gun registration, is going to set up a gun registration in this state. And there's a number of things that I just cannot buy into as part of in this new initiative. I just don't think that
What
it's
about
right.
the one where they want to tax gas and food?
Well,
Not to get off the subject.
you're talking about the one where the sugar tax, basically.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. You know, there are cities, municipalities that have tried to impose some type of a sugar tax. You know, honestly, a tax is a tax is a tax. I mean, you can't, you know, where do you stop? I mean, do you stop at the, you know, how much air you breathe, or do you stop?
Yeah, but they tax groceries.
You know, there are, I guess I get to a certain degree some of the thinking behind why some things should be taxed and some not. I mean, things that you have to have, you know, like food.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not. Maybe those kinds of things should not be.
I don't think food should be taxed.
I mean,
I can understand the gasoline, but, you know,
sure.
although we don't want that to go up, we'll all be riding bicycles around town.
Yeah. That.
It'd be kind of hard for you to catch a bad guy unless you had an engine on it.
They call that a motorcycle. Don't they?
Yeah. Oh, or bicycle with a motor.
So those are my thoughts on, you know, on the Second Amendment. Some of the initiatives. I'll talk real quickly about another initiative that's on the ballot now, which is Initiative 940. And Initiative 940 is being put out as a law enforcement training initiative. So that initiative was written by some folks, part of an organization, and they're good people, they're good intentioned people who wrote this initiative with the idea in mind that there were things that had to do to not only help try to prevent law enforcement shootings, police shootings, but also to change the law in order that law enforcement could more easily be charged with a crime for shooting someone. So I have a couple of things I got to say. One is that much of the training that they talk about, we already do. The crisis intervention training that is talked about in here, where you're training officers to deal with people who are suffering from mental health issues, or in some measure of mental health crisis. Our law enforcement here in Cowlitz County, not just the county, but all of the cities as well, we already do that. We've been doing it for well over a decade. We've been teaching crisis intervention training. So we're ahead of the curve on all of that. the other piece, as far as, and that's that whole de-escalation part. The other piece of the training that they're looking at with Initiative 940. Well, I can leave the training piece real quick and talk about the ability to arrest or charge a law enforcement officer, because that's probably those are probably the two biggest things. They're proposing a change in the law that removes the phrase "without malice." So right now the law requires that an officer act in good faith and without malice. So without malice it's difficult to prove malice, and that's what most of the prosecutors have struggled with, even on shooting situations that were, I'll say, questionable, where the officers, actions were questionable, but because the prosecutor knew that they could not prove malice, they didn't get charged, or they didn't consider charging. So most law enforcement agrees that malice can and probably should be removed from our law, and do use the good faith standard, but also use a reasonable officer standard. The reasonable officer standard, reasonableness actually has a legal definition in our courts. So if you use a reasonable officer standard, it's basically saying, what would another officer with the same training, given the same information, and seeing the same thing that this officer saw, what would his reaction be? Action or reaction be? So
even when you guys have like a good shoot, like, a criminal wants to shoot you and you don't have a choice, then the cop always looks like the bad guy, even if he's in the right.
Well, and that part of that's the problem of the media, television, and
Yeah,
such.
kind of like that kid with the hood on. Which, he was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
It's like one day I was walking home from work, and I had a jacket on with the hood, and a motorcycle cop, and a cop car came up. They thought I was this other woman. And they were, sorry, you're not her. They just said I had looked like her.
Sure.
The type of coat and everything. And I said, I'll show you my ID. And they said, no problem.
Yep.
They showed really bad. They scared me. I was like,
I've had that exact same. I've had that.
do I look like a criminal or what?
I've had that happen to me. I have had
Really?
that happen to me. Yes. Where I was. My wife and I had dinner. I left dinner. I had a meeting to go to. I ran across the street. And jumped into my car and sat around. And they kind of came swooping in, and real quick, and came out. And they're looking. I can tell they're watching my hands. They're doing all the stuff. And then they go, oh, what? It's you. What? He said, we had a robbery over here. We saw you running across the thing,
Yeah, so they assumed it was you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I get it.
Well, this gal had been just a block away the coming from.
Yeah.
They're just scared that, I was like,
Sure. But here's the key part on Initiative 940 that's important. Was that we have, when this initiative was first proposed, it became very, very apparent this was not a good idea. This was not going to be good for law enforcement. It was not going to be good for the state of Washington. So a number of organizations, including a number of the police unions and the State Sheriff's Association and the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, met with these folks and were able to come to an agreement on another bill that basically fixed the problems that this initiative was we were faced with this. So it fixed that. Well, they submitted it all to the legislature, and the legislature, in some procedural issues, with some procedural issues, passed all of it. But the courts then said, no, you didn't follow the right procedure. So they threw it all out and said 940 has to appear on the ballot.
Oh, boy.
So here's what we're asking. Law enforcement in the state of Washington is asking, do not pass Initiative 940. Don't pass it. Allow it to the legislature to take the crafted bill that they've already passed once, and that has support from everybody, including the people who wrote Initiative 940 initially. It has their support. So do that. Let the legislature put into effect the good pieces of initiative, these two initiatives, and make the law in the state of Washington better for law enforcement training and de-escalation. So those are the important things that come with 940. I was honored to be part of the initial stages of those meetings with Initiative 940, and got invited up to the Puyallup casino where they did the big congratulations for everybody, and I got to be part of that. That was very cool. So that was a neat thing. So what else you want to know?
Yeah, he's not.
So you think you're gonna be elected? I think you are.
I'm counting on it. But you know what? It's up to the voters. The voters.
Well, if they're smart, they'll vote for you. Right, Candace?
Where it counts.
Both the cool, it's the scary thing, and but the great thing about this job is that first of all, you have to run for re-election every 4 years. The other important part, I think, is that the voters get to decide, and ultimately that's what our country has been founded on. Not just the politics of it, but who truly is the person who fits this, who fits this job, fits this role, and will do this job on behalf of the citizens, because that's who I work for. I don't work for the commissioners. I don't work. So with that, whether I get elected or not, I guess a week from today we'll find out.
Well, you have my vote.
Well, thank you.
And these ladies over behind you, right?
So that's nice. Yes.
What are your goals for the year ahead and so forth?
We
Do you
kind
have
of
anything?
Well, we're gonna do that, dear. You weren't
I'm
listening.
sorry.
You want me to do a shout out, Candace?
Yeah, that's up to you.
Well, I don't think we need to do a shout out.
That's fine.
Shout out to Longview, vote for Mark Nelson. He's a good candidate and a good sheriff. He's been good to his community because he cares. That makes a good sheriff because he cares and he stands behind the people and he's for the people. Yep. Sound like I'm in Congress.
And I'm. You don't want to do that. And I don't mind touching real quickly on the three priorities again, which for me are school safety and drugs and staffing for the sheriff's office. And I explained early on about how those were important and why they were important. So if you want to know the rest, I guess you have to rewind and play this thing from the beginning.
Well, and happy Halloween, everybody. Don't scare too many people.
Or eat too much candy. Because this is what happens to you when you do that.
If you give lots of treats, you won't get too many tricks.
That's right.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much.
And I enjoyed seeing your family,
My pleasure.
and your mom.
Honored to be here.
And we'll see you all next week on Live from Longview.
Thanks, everybody.
Amen.
God bless.
Was this live tonight or was it?
It was live, man.
There's 18 people